My neighbor, Mrs. Palmer, was the kind of woman you'd see in your neighborhood and barely notice. A quiet widow, always polite, but she kept to herself. Lived in that big old house on the corner for as long as I can remember. We'd exchange pleasantries, a wave when I was getting the mail, a nod when she was tending to her roses. But that was it. That's why it was so strange when she showed up at my door one sunny afternoon, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. Her hands were fidgeting with the strap of her purse, and she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she started, her voice a little shaky. I'm going to visit my daughter for a few days." It was a last-minute thing. She paused, took a deep breath. "I was wondering, could you possibly watch my house?" "Just collect the mail, water the plants." Of course, I said yes. What else could I say? It seemed like a simple, neighborly favor. She handed me a spare key, thanked me profusely, and was gone before I could even ask which daughter she was visiting. I didn't even know she had a daughter. Strange, but I shrugged it off. People have their secrets. The first day was completely normal. Atichi. I collected her mail-just junk and a few bills. I watered her prize-winning roses. The house was silent, just as you'd expect. But that night, things got weird. I was letting my dog out in the backyard before bed, and I glanced over at Mrs. Palmer's house. It was pitch black, a dark shape against the night sky. And then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping. Thump, thump, thump. It seemed to be coming from the back of the house, low down, like from the basement. I froze, listening. The sound was muffled but undeniable. My heart started hammering against my ribs. Her car was gone. She was supposed to be hundreds of miles away. No one should be in that house. I pulled out my phone and called her. The phone rang and rang, then went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Eleanor. Please leave a message." Her voice was cheerful, a stark contrast to the dread coiling in my stomach. I tried again, straight to voicemail. A dozen scenarios ran through my head. A burglar, a burst pipe. Maybe an animal got trapped inside, but the sound was too regular, too methodical. It wasn't the frantic scratching of a trapped squirrel. It was something else. Curiosity, or maybe just plain fear, got the better of me. I told myself I was just being a good neighbor. I had to check. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands trembling as I walked across the lawn to her back door. The key she gave me slid into the lock with a soft click. The air inside was still and cool. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Only silence answered. The thumping had stopped. My own breathing sounded deafeningly loud in the quiet house. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The kitchen was spotless, just as you'd expect from Mrs. Palmer. Everything was in its place. I moved through the living room, the dining room, my light sweeping over old furniture covered in white sheets, looking like a graveyard of memories. The house was empty. But as I stood in the main hallway, I felt a draft. A cold stream of air coming from the basement door. I remembered the thumping. Slowly, I pulled the door open. A wave of musty air washed over me. A smell of damp earth, old wood, and something else, ... Something sharp and metallic, like old pennies or ... Blood, the thought sent a shiver down my spine. I pushed it away. "Don't be ridiculous," I told myself. "Hello." I called down into the oppressive darkness. My voice was absorbed by the shadows. No response. The thumping was gone, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I had to know. Taking a deep breath, I started down the creaking wooden stairs. My flashlight beam bouncing ahead of me, revealing stone walls and cobwebs that looked ancient. The basement was larger than I expected. The main area was filled with the usual clutter: old boxes, a broken washing machine, forgotten furniture. But on the far side, under the main living room, was a section I'd never seen before. A new wall, it looked like, made of cinder blocks that hadn't been painted. And in that wall was a heavy-duty steel door with a serious-looking padlock. It wasn't a standard basement storage room. This was built for something else. This was built to keep something in. I walked closer, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The metallic smell was stronger here. I ran my flashlight over the door. It was cold to the touch. I tried the handle, but it was locked tight, just as I expected. There was no way I was getting in there. I was about to turn back, to just leave, lock the house up, and pretend I heard nothing. But then I saw it. Through the tiny gap between the bottom of the steel door and the concrete floor, a sliver of light. It wasn't yellow or white, like from a normal light bulb. It was a faint, pulsating blue glow. It pulsed with the same slow, steady rhythm as the thumping I had heard from outside. Thump, glow. Thump, glow. My blood ran cold. What was she hiding down here? What in God's name was in that room? I knew right then this was no simple house-sitting favor. I had stumbled onto something I was never meant to see. And Mrs. Palmer wasn't just a quiet widow. She was hiding a secret, a dark and terrifying secret, locked away in her basement. And now, somehow, her secret was becoming my problem. I had to find out what was behind that door. I just had to. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. What do I do now? Do I call the police? What would I even tell them? That my neighbor has a weird blue light in her basement. They'd think I was crazy. No, I had to handle this myself, okay? I had to find a way into that room. My gaze fell on a rusty toolbox in the corner, filled with old crowbars and hammers. An idea, a terrible, dangerous idea, began to form in my mind. I had to know what was making that sound and what was casting that chilling blue light. The old house creaked with a life of its own, but it was the basement that always felt different. A persistent draft seemed to whisper from a wall that looked just a little too new, a little too clean compared to the ancient stone around it. I'd always brushed it off. Another quirk of the old building Mrs. Palmer rented to me. But today, curiosity got the better of me. I pushed against the suspect panel, and with a surprisingly weak click, a section of the wall swung inward. The air that rushed out was stale, thick with the scent of dust and old paper. My phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a small, hidden chamber, no bigger than a closet. The walls were a chaotic collage. Photos, letters, newspaper clippings, all meticulously pinned up. My heart began to hammer against my ribs as my light swept across the images. A familiar face stared back at me from every single one. My face. There were dozens of them. Cutouts from what looked like yearbooks or group photos. Candid shots, some blurry, some shockingly clear. There was one of me leaving for work, coffee in hand. Another of me on my morning jog, sweat glistening on my forehead. One of me laughing with friends at a cafe downtown. Even one of me taking out the trash, a mundane moment captured with unsettling focus. A cold dread, sharp and icy, started to creep up my spine. My gaze landed on one photo that made my breath catch in my throat. It was taken from outside my own apartment window, looking in. The angle was high, probably from the maple tree in the yard. I was sitting on my couch, reading, completely unaware. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a collection. It was a shrine, an obsession. Who would do this? Who had been watching me for so long with such dedication? Interspersed between the photos were handwritten notes, scrawled in a neat, looping cursive that seemed strangely familiar. My light danced across them. He doesn't know I watch him. Read one. He's always safest when he's home, said another, pinned next to the photo taken through my window. The words were possessive, protective even. I can't let anyone hurt him. It was bizarre, a strange mix of threat and care. Then, right in the center of the wall, on a crisp, clean sheet of paper, A single sentence stood out. I'll tell him the truth soon. The truth. What truth? The air in the tiny room felt suffocating. I had to get out. I stumbled back, my mind racing, trying to piece it all together. The familiarity of the handwriting, Mrs. Palmer. It had to be her. My sweet, elderly landlady who brought me cookies and asked about my day. It seemed impossible, but who else had this kind of access? Who else lived right here? The thought was so absurd, so horrifying, that I almost laughed. But the evidence was plastered all around me. I backed out of the hidden room, my hands shaking as I tried to gently push the panel back into place. It wouldn't click. It just hung there, slightly ajar, a dark mouth revealing a secret I was never meant to find. Panic set in. I had to leave. I had to call the police, had to get away from this house, away from her. I turned and scrambled up the rickety basement stairs, my feet thudding against the old wood. I needed to grab my keys, my wallet, and just run. As my head cleared the top of the stairs, I heard it. The sound that froze me in place. The unmistakable squeak of the front door opening, followed by the gentle thud as it closed. Footsteps echoed in the entryway above. Mrs. Palmer was home early, and my heart stopped when I heard her voice, cheerful and warm as always. "Oh dear, you're home already. I'm so glad I've brought a friend. There's someone here I've been dying for you to meet." My body went rigid. I was trapped at the bottom of the basement stairs, hidden in the shadows, listening. I could hear the muffled sound of another voice, a man's voice responding to her. They were moving towards the living room, their footsteps growing louder. I couldn't make out his words, but his tone was low, questioning. "He's just the sweetest boy," Mrs. Palmer continued, her voice filled with a strange, unnerving pride. "So kind, reminds me so much of his father. You'll see the resemblance, I'm sure. His father, my father, left before I was born. I knew nothing about him. What was she talking about?" I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become invisible. I could see their shadows moving across the living room floor from my vantage point. "I just wish his mother had let me be a part of his life," Mrs. Palmer said, and her voice cracked with a genuine sorrow that was more terrifying than any anger. "She took him from me. She told everyone I was unstable. But I found him. I've been watching over him all these years, making sure he's safe." The man spoke again, his voice clearer this time. "Martha, are you sure this is a good idea? Just showing up like this?" Martha, Mrs. Palmer's first name. "It's time, Daniel," she insisted, her voice firm. It's time he knew the truth. That he has a grandmother who loves him, and a father who's been looking for him his whole life. A father. The man's name was Daniel. A cold, shocking realization washed over me, so immense it almost buckled my knees. My mother had told me my father's name was Daniel. She'd said he died in an accident. She'd lied. All these years, she had lied. The man in the living room, my father, and Mrs. Palmer. Martha, my grandmother. The room upstairs fell silent. I held my breath, listening. The photos, the notes, the obsession. It wasn't the creepy fantasy of a disturbed stranger. It was the desperate, twisted archive of a grandmother who felt she'd been robbed of her family. "He's always safest when he's home." The words echoed in my mind, taking on a completely new meaning. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. A declaration from a woman who believed she was protecting her own blood. Then I heard footsteps approaching the basement door. Light, hesitant steps. It was him, my father. "He's down here?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief and a hint of fear. "He likes his privacy," Mrs. Palmer, my grandmother, replied softly. "Go on. It's time." The doorknob began to turn. The door I'd left slightly ajar. I was standing in the shadows, my heart a wild drum against my ribs, the hidden room with its wall of secrets just a few feet behind me. The door creaked open, and a sliver of light cut through the gloom, falling across the stairs. I saw a silhouette, a man's figure, peering down into the darkness, looking for the sun he never knew. And I was standing here, a ghost in my own life, about to step into the light and face a truth far stranger and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The truth that had been watching me my entire life. Thank you for watching. If this story gave you chills, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. I'd love to hear what you would do in this situation, so drop a comment below. Until next time, stay curious.